Now here is Ticky Fullerton on Your Money.
Hello, I'm Ticky Fullerton, every night bringing you a full hour of the very best in business coverage across the nation and internationally, especially where business and politics meet. Today it's all about resources. Agriculture Minister David Littleproud claims victory for dairy farmers as Aldi and Coles bump up milk prices, and he distances himself from the government policy to force the big banks into subsidised loan for flood-stricken farmers with 3-year foreclosures.
This is where I'd warn some caution. Governments of all persuasions need to be very careful.
Well, your government has just put this in.
Well, and as I say, I'm not afraid to say what I think.
There you go. Costco Australia CEO Patrick Noone says his milk will rise too from its 96 cent a litre base in a wide-ranging interview with the Australian's John Jury. And Energy Minister Angus joins us to argue why Labor's climate change targets will be a wrecking ball for the economy. But does he have any better answers in the zone of policy scrambled egg? Well, yeah, I'm just back from an action-packed day at the Australians Global Food Forum, where the big issues absorbing those in agribusiness were aired. And what a day for two big supermarkets to buckle and agree to raise milk prices, hey? Both Coles and Aldi will now join Woolies, broadly up 10 cents a litre. It's been something of a crusade for Agriculture and Water Minister David Littleproud, who took on the cause of dairy farmers that have been driven to the wall on fresh milk. Also on stage was the normally very private king of the down price game, Costco. Australian CEO Patrick Noone said he too would be pushing up prices, although left how much to another day. The US warehouse business, with a model built around customer membership, is set to open new stores in Australia this year, and it's a fascinating story on what sells and why, including the fresh business. Large cooked chooks, all meat and no stuffing, are apparently blitzing it. But after a shocker year of drought and then massive floods in the north, many soft commodities like beef are reeling. We've spoken about it on the show. It's one reason why the forum's founder and sponsor Anthony Pratt believes that value adding remains such a priority. And he's right. Well, let's kick off with energy tonight. The Federal Energy Minister Angus has been out and about all this week, fired up by a very well-timed peer review report by BA Economics climate economist Brian Fisher, also a former head of ABARES. Now, that report has Labor's 45% emissions reduction target, saying it would push electricity prices 50% higher, cost workers up to $9,000 a year in lower wages, and wipe $472 billion from the economy over the next decade. It cost 336,000 jobs as opposed to 78,000 under under the government's 26 to 28% target. Now, needless to say, Labor rejects this and questions the credibility of Dr. Fisher. But Labor is keeping its cards close to its chest. Business claims there has been an unacceptable lack of detail into the impact of climate and energy policies on industry, and has singled out Bill Shorten, Labor leader, questioning how his mooted cap-and-trade scheme for large polluters would actually work. Well, for more on this, I'm delighted to be joined by the Minister for Energy himself, Angus Taylor, who is in Brisbane today. Minister, welcome there. Nice to talk. You're armed with this Fisher report. Labor say it's rubbish modelling and a climate change scare campaign.
Well, Ticky, they would say that. I mean, Brian Fisher is one of the most credible modellers and economists in this area. He's advised Hawke, Keating governments as well as the Howard government in this area. He's been around a long while, he's well known, he's very credible, and he makes a very simple point, which is that you can't get carbon abatement for free. Now, you've reeled out the numbers for Labor's climate policies. That, by the way, is assuming they use the carryover, the credits from Kyoto, that we've beaten the Kyoto target. So you're assuming with those numbers that we actually use those. They haven't actually said they will do that. Right. We've laid out our policies very, very clearly. The Prime Minister did it in a speech over 2 weeks ago, the costs associated with it. We're not saying it's free. But what we do know, Ticky, is that when you push at a pace faster than the natural uptake of technology, the natural efficiency gains that business can get and households can get, and business people really understand this, when you push faster than that, the only way to reduce emissions is to cut activity.
Yeah.
And we're talking in the Labor target about halving, just about halving emissions.
Yes.
You've got to cut activity, and that means mining, agriculture, manufacturing and transport and so on.
Can I start by, though, talking about, you know, the author? I mean, it's no secret that it's much harder to find climate economists, climate change scientists on your side of the debate than it is on the Labor side of the debate. Now, even Warwick McKibbin, who was quoted this week by Guy Debelle, no less, as a climate economist that he respects, he's actually tweeted, he said, check out the 2015 report on the DFAT website on the 45% target when he looked at it. And he said, look, doubling the target should slightly more than double the costs, not increase it by a factor of more than 10. I mean, he's basically saying that the Fisher report is exaggerating this considerably. Why shouldn't people think it's a bit of a scare campaign?
Well, because it's the most comprehensive report and modelling that has been done. It covers all emissions, 100%. McKibbin has never done that. It doesn't just cover the electricity sector, which is only a third of emissions, which is the reports and work that Labor likes to quote. It's done the lot, and it's done it sector by sector, very detailed modelling.
But
all the
it comes
detail
from somebody
that you need
who's
to be
done
able
work
to work
for
it out.
it comes from somebody who's done work also for industry. It's been peer reviewed by a fellow who, you know, I mean, there were reports today suggesting that John Wyant, you know, I mean, he's an eminent academic also, but he's, you know, he's been hired by the Trump administration as a defence expert in a case brought up by a group of children reportedly against the US government over climate action. So this is, it just puts people on opposite sides of the debate, and it goes to the credibility of the reports that you're relying on, I guess.
Well, I completely dispute that, Ticky. I mean, this is peer-reviewed by a Stanford academic, but put that aside for a second. Brian Fisher, as you know, and you've been around agriculture and resources for a long, long while, he's a very credible player. He's contributed to 3 IPCC reports. And let's take the modelling on its merits. There is no other modelling that has gone through sector by sector, laid it out very clearly in the way that Fisher has. And the real issue is that Labor doesn't like the results. I mean, they would like to think that there's fairies at the bottom of the garden and that you can get 45% emission reductions without significant costs. I mean, they're kidding themselves, well, and they certainly shouldn't kid the Australian business.
Yeah, they would say that you're assuming a lot about their policies, which they will reveal before the election, but they haven't revealed them yet. But you're just assuming a whole lot of assumptions.
Hang on, Ticky. They announced this target in November 2015. They announced it in November 2015, and their excuse for not revealing their policies is they're still consulting. They're still consulting. Now, having announced it in November 2015, they've had a lot of time to consult, and they're still not explaining to the business community whether they're going to use carryover, whether they're going to use international credits, who's going to be exempted, what will the impact on fuel prices be, gas prices, diesel prices, you know, a farmer's going to get hit, a manufacturer's going to get hit. They're explaining none of it, Ticky, and they've had since November 2015. So to say, well, hang on, you haven't modelled our policies is, I think, extraordinary, given that they haven't actually, they've had so much time to lay this out. We have reason to be suspicious about their policies because they've refused to lay them out.
All right. They have flagged that they may look at exemptions for agriculture. They've talked about, you know, a credit scheme for the heaviest polluters. They've talked about exemptions for those which are trade exposed. There are also issues like, for example, the Snowy Mountains scheme, which is not included in this Fisher modelling, which could make a very big difference to reducing the cost of firmed up renewable energy. I mean, if Labor starts putting in those sorts of assumptions, I mean, it starts becoming less of a sort of scary scenario than you in the government are putting out?
Well, hang on, I would actually argue the exact opposite. So if they're going to start exempting large parts of the economy, and of course I don't want to have big taxes imposed on agriculture and mining and so on, but if they're going to exempt large parts of the economy, then to get to 45%, they've got to ramp up the impacts on the remaining bits. So if they exempt half the economy, the emissions-intensive trade-exposed parts of the economy. That could be as much as half, depending on what they exempt. Then they've got to double the impacts on the rest of the economy. That means no emissions from the rest of the economy. So, you know, this is the point. If they're going to start exempting, they've got to lay it out. And they've got to lay out then the impacts that we'll see on the rest of the economy, because they've set that target, they've locked it in, they've made it very clear. They've had since before the last election to lay out what will happen, to do their own modelling, to make sure that they've actually got all this adding up. And frankly, Ticky, they're not doing it. And this is good reason to believe.
Yeah. They also suggested that I think, or others have, that you're talking about Labor assuming this moving to target of 45% reductions consistently, and now they may choose to back-end it, they may choose to do all sorts of different things, which would have quite a different impact on the economy.
Well, I mean, it's very standard. Once you pick 45%, under the standard protocol with the Paris Agreement, you just pick a straight line to 45%. So we know exactly how much carbon you've got to abate. It's over 1.3 billion tonnes. 1.3 billion tonnes. That's what 45% implies, versus the 328 we need to abate, which is less than a quarter, Ticky. So they've got to explain how they're going to find that 1.3 billion tonnes. Now, you're right in saying we don't know whether they're going to use carryover from Kyoto, whether they're going to use international credits, how much they're going to hit diesel prices, petrol prices, gas prices. I mean, they haven't explained that. Well, they need to, because, you know, businesses out there are going to be severely impacted by these targets. You know, until now, we've been talking about much lower targets. When you get to 45%, you're almost halving. Yes. And that has very, very real impacts. It is time for them to come clean. You know, I spent my career, as you know, before I went into politics in business. Yes. This is as bigger impost as I have ever seen being proposed, and there are no details. I would be very concerned if I was doing what I was doing before I went into politics, and I'm very concerned for industries that I care deeply about, like agriculture, like the resources sector, like manufacturing, like transport, construction sector, because of the flow-on impacts there we're seeing Fisher's modelling. Very, very big impacts. It all needs to be explained. They've got to come clean.
All right. You know, one of these issues, I mean, you've got this report. It's very helpful. You're out there pitching it. Of course you would be. But it is all about picking numbers out of the air at the moment and using various experts at will to support yourself, whether you're on one side or the other. I mean, watching you go 2 or 3 rounds with Barry Cassidy there on Insiders last weekend, and, you know, you're both talking about 2 different things, really. It's very hard as a punter watching you both, and not really very helpful to the energy debate. Would you agree?
Well, hang on, Ticky. Let's just take it back to common sense, which is, I think, the best way to look at this. What Labor is proposing here is to almost halve the emissions in the economy within a little over a decade, 2030. We're in 2019 now. 11 years they've got to do it. That means in transport, in agriculture, in manufacturing, in mining, and a range of other sectors. I mean, just, you know,
well, you yourself have been surprised.
Someone needs to explain how that can be.
Well, let me give you one thought. You have been surprised. I have been surprised as to how much renewable energy costs have gone down. The world has been surprised at that trajectory. Now, what is to stop
but let's look at that
increasing? For example,
Yeah, so let's look at that. Remember that electricity is 30%, just over 30% of emissions.
Yes.
Right? 30% of emissions. So that's only helping one part of the economy. We're already getting it. And the great challenge now, as you well know, is we've got to firm that up. We've actually got to turn it from intermittent generation into reliable generation. We've got a huge challenge to do that. So that's our challenge in that sector. We're getting the emissions down. Now, you've got to go and find massive emission reductions. In agriculture. What are you going to do about flatulence from cows? How are we going to take the emissions
well, now that is really scaring the horses
of
and
manufacturing?
the
cows. I mean, but this is the truth, Ticky. I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, the thing is,
that's putting Bill Shorten with AOC.
Extraordinary.
You know? Yeah. No. All right. Well, look.
This is what he's got to do.
I do hope you'll be able to come back before the election when you've got a firmer target and Labor's come out with their policy to talk us through that. That'd be great. Angus Taylor, thank you very much.
Sorry, we have a very firm target, Ticky, and I'm delighted. I'd be delighted to come back.
Good on you, Minister. Thank you very much. OK, after the break, a rare interview with Costco Australia Managing Director Patrick Noone.
You're watching Ticky on Your Money. Now, back to Ticky.
Welcome back. Let's take you back to the Australians Global Food Forum now, and we'll begin with US supermarket giant Costco. Here's the Australian CEO, Patrick Noone, in conversation with the Australian's senior journalist from Melbourne, John Dury. Albert, sir, Ben McKee, welcome to the show. I love your B tie, Ben.
Yeah. Thanks, Ticky.
Albert, tell me first, why was Capilano such a strategic investment for you?
I grew up eating Capilano from my pantry in Brisbane. It's an amazing company, founded in 1953, but more importantly, you know, we've got a dozen brands, including Barnes Natural. That was founded in 1876. West Kobe, which West Farmers once owned, which was founded in 1925, and Capilano founded in 1953. Now, for me, when I'm in a Chinese supermarket, the honey aisle is triple the size of the Australian supermarket. It's amazing. They've also got honey and wellness in a separate category next to the wellness category. It's not just in table honey, but also in, you know, traditional wellness and health and so on.
And so, Ben, what has having Albert come on board done for the company?
Well, I think we can now invest in those markets, take a longer term approach to what we're doing. We're no longer an ASX listed company, and we've got the opportunity to really invest in marketing in specific floral honeys and specific like Manuka or prebiotic honeys, which there's a great future for. And
Ben, a bit of controversy really, I think, about a lot of listed companies possibly being taken off the boards, private equity really interested in a lot of these companies. But how has it changed your job? Does it actually make your job easier being private?
Yes, well, I think so. We weren't a huge company as an ASX listed company, so we're on the border of probably being too small to be on the ASX. So being privatised now, I think, is less worrying about what your results are going to be every 6 months, and more about how we can grow the market and invest in markets and see the company be great in 3, 5, 10 years.
And Albert, what did you think about Anthony Pratt's comments about value adding in Australia, the importance of value adding and continuing to look to Australian exports?
Extremely important, great comments. I would take it to the next stage in terms of once you value add, it's very important to brand a product. And importantly, you know, Asian consumers, like Chinese consumers, for example, build loyalty and trust in a brand. And I think if you take the next step into really putting these value-added products into a brand, and that brand stands for something, you can really command a margin and become a price setter.
So you're talking about going from commodity to value add, but then taking the next step to brand.
Exactly, exactly. You know, A2 has done really well, for example. Bubs is doing really well, you know, and Capilano obviously had an issue last year, but it's recovering strong.
And to running the business, Ben, I mean, how much of your time is spent on marketing and how much of it is actually looking after your beekeepers?
Yeah, well, I'm actually from a beekeeping family, so I'm more operational as a CEO.
McKee,
yeah, that's right. Yes, I told you that in a weak moment. But, yeah, I'm more operational, so I concentrate a lot on the supply chain and servicing our beekeepers and getting them the best price, because without them, actually, you know, our company's nothing.
How serious a threat is the quarantine issue, disease, and the importance of strong borders, Ben?
So for bees, we're the last continent in the world that doesn't have varroa mite. So varroa mite is a pest and disease. You have to use chemicals to control it. So because we don't have varroa mite here, that's why our industry is so great, so healthy, and our bees are so healthy. We've got the healthiest bees in the world with the best floral diversity in the world. So we've got keeping our borders clear of of a Varroa incursion coming in is the most significant issue facing our
And
industry.
governments are very conscious of that?
Yeah, very conscious. And the industry is too. We actually have special hives set up around ports looking for this Varroa mite. It can only live on live bees, so it can only come in on mostly shipping or planes where there's live bees on it. So being able to protect ourselves and get onto that if it ever comes in quickly, which we have already done in the past, there's been incursions and we've been successful in stopping it, is probably the most important issue for our industry.
And Ticky, you should know that Ben also has a PhD in honey.
Right.
Yes, from the University of Melbourne.
Yeah.
Not just a fifth-generation beekeeper, but also Dr. Ben McKee, or Dr. B. McKee.
So, Albert, obviously you've got a lot of confidence in your management now. What about this whole idea of active honey, which seems to be fixating the market?
It's active honey. I think, you know, Australia has great active honey, so it's not just New Zealand. We actually have a joint venture with New Zealand's largest Manuka company, Comvita, in Australia to source Australian Manuka honey. Chinese consumers love it, but I think more research should be done on other varieties of honey. We, as I said, have a brand called West Kobe, which does a lot of Jara honey. That also has activities. No, we really focus on developing new premium, unique products that we can actually bring to the Chinese consumer and Asian consumers.
And Ben, bit of an issue, I suppose, over this branding of Manuka at the moment, which I guess the New Zealanders would like to have exclusively.
Yeah, well, we've got a bit of a debate on them about the naming rights. I mean, obviously, we actually think, you know, the Manuka actually came from Australia. We've got 83 species of Manuka in Australia. They've only got one species in New Zealand.
They've done a pretty good job, though, of selling it.
They have done a great job of marketing it. I'll give them that. Yeah. But as for the name, we've been calling honey Manuka here since, you know, the early 1900s. So it's not as though we've just jumped on the bandwagon.
So your expectations, Albert, for Capilano and growth going forward?
We just changed the name of the company to Hive and Wellness Australia to really reflect the stable of brands, not just in Capilano, but across the company. Very, very excited. We've got really good people joining in our sales and marketing team with really good China and Asian experience. So,
and you got any targets at all on growth or revenues? Anything you can share with us?
No, you know, and that's a good thing about being a private company. I'll share this with you next year.
Well, that's
He's sharing a lot of them with me.
And finally, you're changing the brand to sort of health and wellness. Are you going to add any other products into it beyond honey, Albert?
Yeah, look, already Hive and Wellness already has apple cider vinegar. We have a molasses product, and molasses is a very big product in China. You know, it's one of New Zealand's kind of biggest brands is a molasses product. So we're excited about all this new product development. Again, you know, we've got so much in the pipeline and very excited to be able to talk about it next time I see you, you know, because we've only been shareholders for a few months.
Albert Say, Ben McKee, great to talk. Thanks very much, fellas.
Thanks, Ticky.
Yeah, and a slight mix-up there. You may have noticed that was Albert Say, founder of Wattle Hill, and Ben McKee, Capilano CEO. After the break, my interview with Agriculture Minister David Littleproud next.
This is Ticky on Your Money, covering the big business stories.
Welcome back. Agricultural Minister David Littleproud is a busy man, from dealing with irate irrigators out bush this week on the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, struggling dairy farmers railing against rock-bottom milk prices, to handling the running media commentary on Nat colleagues like Barnaby Joyce. But he's not afraid to take a position, and most interestingly today, Minister Littleproud made it pretty clear he wasn't at all happy with the government forcing big banks to get locked into subsidised loans for distressed farmers. Remember those floods? Hardly a way, though, to encourage lending. I spoke to the Minister down at the Global Food Forum. Yes, well, Minister, welcome, and what a day to have you, sir. A bit of a victory on the milk front.
Definitely. Very excited. This is only a first step. I've been criticised for asking Australians to boycott supermarkets that weren't prepared to support the dairy industry while I was making reforms to the market. And for them now to have yielded is a big step. And I understand Costco were here earlier saying, well, they might do it. Well, I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to say to every Australian, until they yield and they do what the others have done, please consider where you shop.
So Patrick Noone was saying, yes, we'll be looking at pushing it up. Have you got a number for him? Because he didn't have a number for us.
Well, he better be snappy. He better do it very quickly. The reality is I've got to put my hand up. I've got work to do too, and I've announced the mandatory code of conduct, and there's some more work around getting purity in that market. But the ACCC gave us a clear indication that there is an imbalance in the marketplace. And the government should only interfere in marketplaces when there's an imbalance. It's been identified, and it's not only supermarkets, but the processors have a role to play. This is about fairness. These dairy farmers aren't charities, and I get all the supermarkets say we get these donations, and our shoppers put a few dollars in the tin on the way out.
But it's also an extraordinary thing because it goes against the whole cost of living drive as well, doesn't it?
Well, again, it comes back to fairness, and I think every Australian, whether it costs them an extra 10 cents a litre on their milk, would say that's fair, because that's all Australians want is a fair go, and our dairy farmers won't get any fair go, and government's got to work. Industry's got to work, otherwise we won't have a sustainable supply of dairy product into Australia. And we are the best producers, the cleanest producers.
So, David, this was something of a personal crusade for you. You're the Minister for Milk, if you like. Now, Anthony Pratt has called for a Minister for Food in the Prime Minister's office. What do you think of that? Be a good idea?
Oh, look, I think after the election, and God willing, we get back in, I think there is a need for us to look at agriculture and through the entire supply chain. I think that makes sense at the moment. We had a strawberry incident about 6 or 8 months ago, and there was 3 or 4 different agencies that were involved in that. And this is about agricultural production from the farm gate right through the supply chain. I think that makes sense. Other nations around the world have started on that journey and already, in fact, implemented.
$150 billion business. So does it deserve
totally.
that sort of priority?
Totally. And I think that's a conversation we should be having. I think that's a sensible one. And that only promotes the supply chain, and it promotes brand Australia. We've got a competitive advantage about how we do it here in this country. And we should celebrate that, and that's from the farm gate right through.
You have a number of sticky issues to deal with. Now, one of those is water and calls from farmers in particular. I know you were up at Mooroopna this week. Tell us about that and the calls for the Murray-Darling Basin plan to be put on pause.
Yeah, well, look, I faced probably 100 angry irrigators that are hurt by the Murray-Darling Basin plan. Some call it stupid, but others call it courageous. I told them to their face, I'd rather look them in the eye and say, I'm not going to pause the plan. We do not.
So that is 100%. You're not going to pause.
I'm not going to pause the plan, and you've got to be honest with people. You just don't run in front of people and say you tell them what they want to hear. That's the easiest thing I can do is fly in, tell them what they hear, and then go and they never see me again. This is the first time in our nation's history that we have all the basin states and the Commonwealth in agreement of the management of the Murray-Darling Basin. This is the biggest environmental program in our nation's history. And what I wanted to do, because in Queensland I own nearly all of the Murray-Darling, and I've seen the hurt and the frustration about the uncertainty in their eyes, and they want government out of their lives. And my job, my opportunity as the Minister over the last 15 months is to do something about that. So I didn't want to call people names, and I've got to acknowledge that Tony Burke responded. This is too big for politics. They were sick of politics.
But how is that? I mean, you're in the middle of an election. How is that playing out in the bush? I mean, some of us do remember how hard it was to get South Australia and New South Wales, never mind Queensland, to sign up to this.
Yeah.
But equally, out in the bush, people are hurting. It's very dry.
It is. And one of the things that will solve this is rain. The reality is it hasn't rained, and a lot of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan issues have been exacerbated by this dry. And Year 8 geography will tell you, unless it comes from the sky, runs off the ground into the rivers don't run. And that's why we had a fish kill event. And that's one of 600 we've had in New South Wales over the last 20 years. And I grew up on the Condamine River, and they happened when I was a kid.
But the cost of water has gone up even faster than a lot of people expected for irrigators. Now, I know, say, the head of Aldi was saying, right, OK, we might put the price of milk up, but the government's got to do something about restructuring the dairy industry, and fast.
Well, we are. I got a report from the ACCC on the 30th of April. I went straight to the industry and I said, you tell me, is that what you want? Do you want a mandatory code of conduct? That was on the 30th of April. I started to get criticised and I got jack of it, to be honest. I thought, you know what, I'm not going to keep taking the uppercuts. I called the ADF in and said in August, I said, I'm finishing Parliament for 2 weeks. When we come back, either you decide whether you're a mandatory code or I'm going to give you one, and you'll get Littleproud's mandatory code. To their credit, they came and said, we want one. We have acted as quickly as we possibly can to get the code up and get it implemented, and last week I announced it. But you have to make sure you do it in a methodical and sensible way, and we had to do a regulatory impact statement so there was no unintended consequences. So we've done this quicker than any other code, and that's not going to come in, and I've got to be open and transparent. It won't come in until July next year because we've got to honour the contracts that are in place at the moment. And that's why I was so adamant that the supermarkets had to do some heavy lifting with me. And this bought time to keep dairy farmers there. We're now underneath $9 billion litres of milk and going south at a great rate of knots. So this is why yesterday was a big day for Coles and Aldi to meet Woolworths, and Costco I'm sure will trump them in the next 24 hours. But the reality is this is about resetting where there's market failure. That's the only time government should interfere in a marketplace.
David, can we drought-proof Australia, and should we be turning around the Tully, the Herbert to do it?
I think we've got to be careful and methodical about this, but we should back ourselves. We're Australians. We're better than anybody else.
1938.
Yeah, well,
J. Bradfield thought of this. That's quite a long time to think about it.
But let's be careful. I'm not exactly promoting the Bradfield scheme. I think iterations of it, I think the science and technology that we have now is far better than what it was in 1938. So let's back ourselves. Sometimes we perpetrate our own misery in this country by saying we can't do things.
But do you believe in the idea of moving water from where there's loads of it at times in Australia, piping it to somewhere else? I mean, no one talks about salinity in this country anymore.
Well, this is where you can get the balance right between the environment and the social and economic benefits. And the further you have to pipe it, the less viable it becomes. But the reality is, we as a government have put $1 billion. We've spent 500 of that already. I can go and dig as many holes as I want around this country, but I can't fill them because the state governments own the resource. So we want to get water infrastructure. We want dams and we want to pipe it and use science and back the environment as well. But we can do that. We've got the best minds in the world. But we've got to back ourselves to do it, and we can do that. And that's what that $1 billion is about. I'd be happy to cut a cheque a lot bigger if we can get the science right, and I think we should explore that science. And I think Bradfield, as was mooted in 1938, has a lot of flaws in it. But there's some work that should be looked at in terms of the science and technology we've got now, whether it's not necessarily going all the way, but moving it in a sensible way where the economics does add up.
We've had not just drought, we've had the misery of the floods up north. One of the really important issues that's knocking around at the moment, particularly post the Hayne Royal Commission, is access to finance for farmers. Where are we? Yeah,
look, we got a perverse situation in this country. I used to be a bank manager, agri-manager, used to sit around farmers' kitchen tables. We got a perverse situation in this country where the traditional banks lend nearly as much to Australian in credit card limits as they do to the agriculture sector. We're a $60 billion industry. So we need more capital, not less. And what we've got to be careful of is the unintended consequences. We've got to have a strong regulatory framework to make sure the financial institutions are doing the right thing. But government shouldn't overreach into the capital markets and impose on them a lack of confidence in agriculture. Agriculture is a good story. The story of agriculture is just add rain. It is sexy again. There is money to be made in agriculture, and we've got to be careful about the narrative that we put out. Yes, it's been challenging with drought and flood. You know what? It's not our first rodeo. We're going to get them again. But we've come through it, and we've taken it from a $34 billion industry to a $60 billion industry at the farm gate in 8 years. So you've got to give the financial markets confidence to invest in us. And again, we've got to be careful of that narrative, and we've got to give them the environment where they make sure there's a regulatory framework around them, but give them confidence that they're going to make a quid like our farmers.
So you talk about that. Now, that's a really important point. Banks have been bashed around for months now. There's now this subsidised loan plan forcing banks to offer subsidised loans to farmers who've been struggling as a result of the drought, and to make sure that they do not foreclose before 3 years. Now, how does that separate from, credit-wise, from a farmer who's genuinely on his back legs but needs to get up and can go again, and somebody else, farmeress, who actually shouldn't be there?
This is where I'd warn some caution. Governments of all persuasions need to be very careful.
Well, your government has just put this in.
Well, and as I say, I'm not afraid to say what I think. That's what I'm paid to do. And I can't just think about one part of the agriculture sector that's doing tough at the moment. I've got to think right across the nation and the unintended impacts and consequences that could have. I've worked with the banks, and we're going to have a national debt mediation framework where the banks deal with those that are doing it tough and may need to exit with dignity and respect. And as a whole, I've got to say the banks have done that pretty well. Now, there's aberrations in any industry, whether it's the banking industry, the legal profession, the accounting profession, medical profession. You've got to make sure you can weed that out.
It sounds like that policy should be rethought.
With respect of?
With respect to this forced, no foreclosure for 3 years.
Well, I think, and that's where I think we need to work collaboratively with the banks. I think we've now got an environment where we can work collaboratively with them to make sure we give them the confidence to continue to invest. Because why would you invest your capital into an industry where government comes over the top and says, you know what, circumstance takes outside your control, we're going to rip out the value of that asset. That's not the Australian way. Right. And what I'm concerned is that then means that if there's another incident, whether it be in Shepparton or be in WA, what could happen is that they say, well, it's all too hard. They're lending over $1 trillion to the housing market, 70 billion in the ag space. Why would you go and put your capital into ag? So we've got to make sure we get that foundation right, and this is a bigger discussion about broader agriculture getting more capital, and it goes to the farm gate, because if you don't have competition in the market, you can't lease a tractor, you can't buy a property, you can't get your son into the property after you.
Briefly, finally, I think we need to talk about Barnaby Joyce. Where is, you're in, as I say, in an election campaign at the moment. You're pipped as a future leader. I mean, how do you see his actions at the moment? And is he back in his box now?
Well, look, the good thing is, as Nationals, we're 21 individuals that span across the country, and my electorate is different to electorate in Shepparton as it is into Gippsland, as it is into Port Macquarie. We're all unique. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. Why do we want a cookie-cutter approach from our political parties where you can't have diversity of ideas and a diversity of arguments? That's not a healthy thing. The media wants us to be uniformed. But actually, I think it's a healthy thing that we have people that have unique ideas, and not necessarily all of them float. Some of mine, I can tell you, not all those float. I'm not the beholder of all wisdom and knowledge. The reality is that's a good thing. How we harness that is the question for the National Party, but I think that's a good thing that we're not always in unison with our coalition colleagues. We have a transactional relationship with them, and that's what it should be, and that's the best thing for the bush. That's the best thing for regional Australia.
Minister, thank you so much for talking to me. Jackson, thank you. After the break, as promised, that special interview with Costco Australia Managing Director Patrick Noone.
Now, back to Ticky.
Welcome back. Well, let's take you straight to Costco Australia CEO Patrick Noone in conversation with the Australian senior journalist from Melbourne, John Dury.
Now, Patrick, I guess the subject of the day is milk prices. Last time I looked, you were selling milk for under $1 a litre.
96 cents, yeah.
96 cents. Yeah. Is that going to change?
Prices are going up, yes. Right. We're getting pressure from our suppliers to increase pricing anyways, so we'll probably see prices going up at Costco as well. Yeah.
Is that right? By the same sort of level? Or?
We're a membership warehouse club, so our rules are a little bit different. We want to have the best price of the market all the time. Right. We'll look at what competition is, and we'll look at what our pricing should be. Yeah.
Okay. You can't be more specific.
No, I can't.
Fair enough.
I sound like a politician, don't I? I don't know why. Sorry. Forgive me, any politicians here.
Yeah. Patrick, I guess most of you have been to a Costco store, but you probably don't realise the work that goes in behind it. And from Patrick's point of view, maybe you could just give people a bit of a rundown of how Costco works globally.
You know, we're a global retailer. We're probably one of the few around the world. I go back to Seattle every month, every 4 weeks, and I take back with me a slide deck of our best-selling items we've produced and sold here in Australia. And those items are presented to the forum, which is all the country managers and all the US folks and Canada and Mexico. And what we see is, what I get from that is a lot of international items I can look at bringing here, but also a lot of our cousins, if you like, in Asia and China now, looking at the Australian-produced items and buying them for their markets. So in a sense, we're a conduit for some of the really terrific locally made food products, value-added or commodity items being sold in Asia. So Costco operates in Japan, Taiwan and Korea. In Australia, I've got 10 warehouses, about $2 billion. In those countries, I've got 20 or 30 buildings doing multiples of $1 billion above what I'm doing. So in a sense, it opens up Australian 10 warehouses in Australia, becomes, if you like, 30, 40, 50 warehouses globally at this point. And also the US folks are picking up items as well. I think A2 milk is going to start in the US pretty soon, which is extraordinary because we brought it into Australia first here. So that's a big success story for the Australian market.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of commodities are you exporting now?
Well, a lot of organic foods, beef going up into Japan, a lot of produce going up into all 3 Asian countries, fish, pork, beef are going around the world. So it's all those countries look to us, and if we can get the items produced and packaged the way Costco likes them, then there's pretty much a good market for us up there.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So what do you see down the pipeline?
I continue to see more and more packaged goods that we make here in Australia. We work with a lot of local vendors and devise items that look great, value added if you like as well. And once they sell well in the Australian Costco's with the right packaging, our philosophy is the same all over the world. So it has to be a larger size pack showing great value. So if you can get a 5 kilo bag of walnuts and we can sell it in Australia, then we'll sell it in Japan, Korea and Taiwan as well. Sure. So that's what we see happening all the time. And as we grow our business here, we're seeing more and more opportunities for local manufacturers and farmers to work through us, if you like, to the rest of the world.
Yeah, great. I was talking to Harry Debney from earlier, and one of his biggest problems to get planning laws to get new structures, and I think you spent your life in a planning office.
I have. Well, Costco's a big box retailer, and a lot of when we first came here in 2006, we spent a lot of time trying to discuss how we couldn't build a Costco of 14,000 square metres in a town centre. It's too expensive, the land's too expensive, but we need to have a big space, ideally good transportation, road transportation. So over the years now, after the Docklands building opened in 2009, we've been relatively successful rezoning all the land we have to now have 10 Costco's in Australia, soon to open our 11th in May, and then Perth next year.
Yeah. But how long does it take you from go to wire once you decide to set up?
I budget about a year and a half. Yeah, wow. Yeah, at least 12 months in the fastest market. It would be awesome, but normally it's a year and a half. Depending on the state, it could be up to 2 years as well.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is any one state worse than another?
Yes, there's slower and faster states that are out there, yeah.
You are a good politician, aren't you?
I am. I was told to watch my back, Randy John.
So which state would you put in the fast?
Well, Docklands was a 3-year process, and to be honest, but that was a new concept in downtown Melbourne. And it took a lot of effort to explain Costco. The Ipswich building we're opening next month was about a 12-month process up there. So it does vary depending on what the project is and which state we're in. Yeah.
Right. So it sounds like Queensland's fast.
Well, in this case, it was faster. Yeah.
Very. What would be your message to Australian farmers in terms of, or food processors, I guess, in terms of how to get on the Costco list? Like, what are you looking for?
Well, we're looking for, Costco is, because we're global, we have global standards, and we look at towards the US and Canadian markets about what they buy, what they package, and what they sell. And the US market now is going incredibly strong in organics, which is moving very, very quickly in that market. We like to do more organics here as well. We package everything in larger sizes. We'd like to have berries, for example, all year round in a big tub. So that's where we work with our growers to try and figure out how the investment in the Australian produce market can equal the quality and the standards that we see around the world. And for the most part, we can produce great products here. But the packaging side of it, we'd like to see more investment in some packaging that suits our needs, certainly larger size packaging and larger size cell units, and also recyclable packaging that the industry could come together and produce and be recycled as well.
Yeah, that seems to be a prevailing theme. We need more investment in packaging in this country. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. More investment in packaging, probably a little bit more sophisticated packaging from our point of view, but certainly a recyclable effort from industry and government working together to package grapes in a plastic container and take it home, and then put it into something where it can be recycled, picked up, and come back as a grape container again, and so on and so on. So I think that's a challenge for us here.
Yeah, okay. I think your sales now are around the $2 billion mark.
Yeah.
Which compares to like Coles, I think, is around 31. Woolies around 45.
Yeah.
So you're still a relatively small player.
Yeah.
Do you think you've had any impact on the local industry?
I think so. I think I think we push some boundaries in the retail world. I mean, we definitely have a different way of doing business, and certainly larger pack sizes. We drive a lot more value into the market. We've noticed some changes there, but Woolworths and Coles are retailers that have a specific market that they function to. We challenge ourselves on pricing, but because we do everything a lot different at Costco in terms of the packaging and the efficiency and logistics, etc., we're always going to have an edge on pricing, but we're never going to carry the items that the local market carries. We have about 3,500 items in our Costco, and they have about 30,000 items. So I can never be that because it doesn't suit what we try and do. So I think we can exist side by side, if you like. Obviously, we're driving value in a lot of commodity items, a lot of branded goods, and happy to compete on that basis with them.
Right. There's a little firm called Amazon that's been talked about a bit, and I guess you're used to competing with them globally, right?
That's right. We compete in North America with them right now. So, it's an interesting, the market, one thing about retail, it changes every day. It's exciting. So Amazon's in Australia now. I haven't seen much of a change. I checked their pricing. Our pricing is still quite a bit cheaper than they are. And I guess at this point in time, the consumers choose convenience to pricing, and we can exist quite easily together.
Yeah, so you think their threat's been overplayed then?
Certainly, I've not felt the death-defying threats that I was led to believe was going to happen.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's very encouraging. Is that just a matter of time, do you think? Or?
I think the world's changing all the time, so I think Costco's got to think about doing some e-com business too at some point in the future here in Australia. We're very successful in the US, and we're looking to launch our first foray in that later this year.
Yeah. What do you think it is that takes someone into your store? Like, why would I go to a Costco instead of Aldi or Woolworths or Coles?
Great value is the one. We talked recently about the Costco experiences, and you got great value, you got great brands, and you got great food products. Our meat program is second to none.
Right.
So when you're standing over a barbecue cooking the best piece of meat of your life and you're giving it to your neighbour, what do you talk about? I got this at Costco. This is where I got it from. So word of mouth advertising for us is very important, and literally millions of people a year hear that, and they come to Costco in Australia.
Advertising in newspapers works well.
It does, yeah. It does. It's so expensive, though. Oh,
Huh? Well, my father used to say, "Quality's remembered long after the price."
That's right.
Yeah. So, what we call fresh food, what would that be as a percentage of your sales?
About 18 to 20%, depending on the warehouse that we run.
Sure.
It's very important. The meat program is a very, very important program for us, as is the produce and our bakery program as well.
Yeah. So do you see that because that's a real battleground for the supermarkets now, fresh food. Is that?
Yeah, look, our pricing is really sharp. Our quality is much better, I think, in a lot of ways as well. If speaking from my own experiences, how do you take a roast chicken and make it better? So our roast chicken is about a pound or 400 or 500 grams heavier than our competition. So we have a much bigger roast chicken. We don't have any stuffing, so that's really probably 600 grams bigger if you take the stuffing out of the other competitors. And we're about $3 cheaper. So you take an item like that and you put it out there, you make a little bit of money on it because you're going to get good volume on it, which is what Costco does, and you're going to sell the heck out of it. So we've had a tremendous business selling roast chickens in Australia, and now we're exporting those same chickens to, I think Japan's buying them, and perhaps Taiwan, I think, is buying them too. So that's the way we do it at Costco. You lower the price, give great value, and you drive the business and drive it hard.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Are there any items in particular that are, because you sell everything, from roast chicken to diamonds, right?
That's right, yeah. Bathroom tissue to diamonds. We actually make bathroom tissue in Adelaide now, and it's about 20% cheaper than the one we used to buy from the US, so it's under our own brand. And it's going to be our #1 item this year is bathroom tissue, if you can believe that. You buy 48 rolls of it and stock up. We sell diamond rings, so you can buy a diamond ring for your wife. I don't know how much money the newspapers make, so you can get one of those. We sell a 24-pack of roses.
More of the toilet tissue.
We can sell roses, a couple of T-bone steaks, some Alaskan crab legs, and an engagement ring. And on the way out, you can pick up a coffin as well. So it's the full meal deal, the whole life experience.
Yeah, very good. Very good. But are there? Is fresh like something that people like the milk battleground was because milk is one of those products that takes people into supermarkets. Is like fresh food like that for you?
Yeah, it's very important to us. You know, the quality and standard of our fresh areas, it's all open to the public. You can see in the production facilities, you can see the meat cutters cutting meat, you can see the bakers baking. And that drama and theatre really drives business for us. And you know, it's been very, very successful, and that brings people into the business. And of course, they load up on their diamonds and TVs and Calvin Klein sweaters and Tommy Hilfiger when they're there as well. So,
Private label, is that a big?
Yeah, we're doing more and more of that. We import a lot from the United States, only because we're in our infancy. That's the easiest way to do it.
Right.
We now bottle water here in Australia, and we have bathroom tissue. We do walnuts, and there's plans afoot for almonds and butter and dairy and a few other things as well.
In private label.
In private label, and ideally, that private label manufactured here for us would be then exportable to our cousins up north.
Right. Yeah. So what percentage of your sales would be private label?
Oh, in the 10% range at this point in time. Not that high, at this point.
Yeah.
In the US, where it's much more developed, it's a much higher percentage. Yeah.
Right. Great. So in terms of the export market, it sounds like you're offering a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think we've got great quality here in Australia. You know, we've got great products and great vendors. We deal with a lot of great manufacturers here. Many of them are here in the room today, and we're really driving that business. And they work with us. We devise larger packaging, unique items, some crazy stuff we're doing, and those items get noticed around the world.
Yeah, fabulous. Patrick, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all for the show tonight. Tomorrow night, Alibaba's Maggie Jo and Janice Henderson's Jane Schumacher. Thank you for your company.